Salutations, subscribers! I have returned! I do apologise for the lack of substantial content these last few weeks or so. Don't worry, I have at least 3 videos planned for this month, including the one you're watching now, so that's something at least. Alright, not going to beat around the bush. Welcome to a new video. Today we are going to be laying down what I think is the best episode for each Doctor 1 through 13. Now, couple of rules for this video. The only Doctor I'm going to skip is the War Doctor because I haven't read any books or comics or listened to any big finishes from him, or at least not enough to really pick out a best. Learn to speak, please. And for the 8th Doctor I'm going to be including Big Finish, but for all the other Doctors, just to keep things simple, I'm going to stick to the TV series. So, yeah. And one more thing, of course, with the 1st and 2nd Doctors, it's only going to be out of the episodes I've seen, because missing episodes, it's kind of tricky to see them, you know? Right, the 1st Doctor. This one was kind of a toss-up between the first 2 Dalek stories in the end. I had to think a lot about this one, but in the end I went with The Daleks, the 1st Dalek episode, and Hartnell's 2nd ever story. It was a toss-up between this and the Dalek invasion of Earth, but I think this one just clinched it, mainly because of some slight nostalgia, because this was the first one that I saw out of the first 2 Dalek stories, and I do have quite a bit of a soft spot for it. I just really enjoyed it when I first watched it, and I pretty much enjoy it on every rewatch, and yeah. It is 7 parts long, it is kind of longer than it should be, but yeah, I don't know, I just always had a bit of a soft spot for this, and that part 1 cliffhanger is just... fucking chills, I tell you. So yeah, just a lot of nostalgia off this one for it being one of my first Hartnell stories that I watched. I just generally find it a really enjoyable episode, if a bit long. Okay, the 2nd Doctor. This one was actually tougher than the 1st Doctor because there's so many good episodes. Power of the Daleks, the Moon Base, the Enemy of the World, the Mind Robber, the War Games, even the Macra Terror I think is brilliant in the Faceless ones. But in the end, I think I made the tough decision and narrowed it down to The Invasion, the 8-part Cyberman story from season 6. Yes, it is an 8-parter, but trust me, it's well worth sitting through the nearly 4-hour-long runtime. It is just brilliant. 8 parts, how long would that be? It's about 3.5 hours, I think. It's well worth sitting through, trust me. It's got the 2nd Doctor, it's got Jamie and Zoe, it's the first ever Unit story, it's the first ever time we see Unit, it's got Cybermen, it's got Tobias Vaughan, possibly one of the best human villains we've ever had in the show. Yeah, there's just so much good stuff to talk about in this episode. Just fucking go and watch it, it's bloody brilliant. The Invasion, parts 1 and 4 are animated because they were missing, and it was like the first episode they officially animated for DVD reconstruction, so it is a bit dodgy, a little bit wonky, but it's good, it's well worth it, trust me. Check out The Invasion, you will not be disappointed, just fucking watch it. Okay, 3rd Doctor's best story. For me, this was tough. I like pretty much every 3rd Doctor episode. Yeah, in the end I went with Inferno. There were so many episodes that I could have picked for this, but Inferno has just always stood out to me as being bloody phenomenal. 7 parts long, so again, it's a bit longer than it probably should be. This could have been a 6-parter. So yeah, Inferno. Yeah, brilliant plot. The first time Doctor Who explored a parallel universe idea, or parallel Earth, so it's notable for that. Pertwee's brilliant performances from the other regular cast, both in their normal world and as their like evil alternate universe counterparts. That's all fantastic as well. And I just really like this episode. Really love it. Every time I sit down to watch it, it's just so enjoyable to just get invested in. Yeah, and it's always going to be on my top list of best Pertwee stories and probably best classic episodes at the very least, you know. 4th Doctor. This one was kind of tough. I picked out a lot of stories, and in the end I got it narrowed down to between Genesis of the Daleks and the Seeds of Doom. And I know Genesis of the Daleks is obviously cited as one of the best, if not the best Doctor Who episodes of all time, but personally I ended up siding with the Seeds of Doom over Genesis. I think the main reason is Well, while Genesis and Caesar Doom are both just amazing episodes overall, Genesis, being 6 parts, is a little bit drawn out. The only real criticism I have of Genesis of the Daleks is that it slightly extends its stay. Yeah, Genesis of the Daleks I feel is a little bit longer than it should be, and that's the only real criticism that I can level at it, to be honest. Whereas Seeds of Doom is also 6 parts long, so it's the same length, and it's also just as good of a plot and an episode in general, but it whizzes by. It's 2.5 hours long, but it whizzes by as though it were a 2-part New Who story, so like an hour and 20 minutes. It whizzes by so much, and I think that really is testament to just how good of a story it is. The pacing's great, the plot's great, the action in it's great, the creepiness is great of the Krynoid, the man-eating plant thing. Harrison Chase is a fucking complete unhinged nutcase without coming across as an over-the-top caricature of a villain. It's got John Challis in it, playing Scorby, who was Boise in Only Fools and Horses, so that's notable. And yeah, the 4th Doctor and Sarah Jane, one of the best TARDIS teams we've ever had, so there's really nothing to hate in this episode. Literally no criticisms of the Seeds of Doom, like, at all, that I can think of right now. It's just that good. Definitely 4's best. Okay, next up, the 5th Doctor. This was like the easiest pick ever. It's the Caves of Androzani. There were a few stories from 5's era that I really liked, but in the end, it was inevitable that Caves would come out on top. And I'm not even going to talk about it in this video because anyone who knows anything about Doctor Who will probably have heard of the Caves of Androzani at least once. All you gotta do is search it up on Google or YouTube and you'll instantly find out a million reasons from a million people why it's like the best episode ever, and definitely 5's best, I'd say. So yeah, moving on to the 6th Doctor. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I actually couldn't pick one story, so for the 6th Doctor I have 2, and that is Vengeance on Varos and Revelation of the Daleks. I'm putting these 2 in like a joint first place for the best 6 stories. There are some similarities between them actually. They're both incredibly dark and grim, which I love. The pacing on them is both fantastic. The atmosphere and music of them both are just... They honestly couldn't be better, even if you got in like the best TV making people of all time to come in and make it. That's how good it is. That's how good they both are. Obviously, Revelation of the Daleks has the Daleks and Davros, so right off the bat you've got some of the best villains in the franchise. And then Vengeance on Varos introduces us to one of the more underrated iconic villains of classic Who, Syl. If there was ever to be a list made by me of classic Who villains that I'd like to see come back in New Who sometime that haven't yet returned, Syl from Vengeance on Varos and then Mind Warp later on would definitely be in the top 5, I'd say. Easily the top 5. A similar thing to the Caves of Androzani, shall we say, with both of these stories as well, Vengeance and Revelation, is I feel like they're both stories that, like the Caves of Androzani, apart from the main 2 regular cast members, you really can't trust any of these side characters. Like, you can trust like barely any of the guest characters in these 2 stories. Just like in Caves of Androzani. Long story short, Vengeance on Varos and Revelation of the Daleks, absolutely brilliant, prime Colin Baker material from the TV show. And yeah, alright, number 7. This one was pretty difficult actually. I love like almost every 7th Doctor story, but in the end it became a toss-up between Remembrance of the Daleks and the Caves of Androzani, and I think Remembrance of the Daleks just ever so slightly clutched it. If Curse of Fenric is, say, a 9.5, then Remembrance of the Daleks is probably a 9.6. The thing about Curse of Fenric is, it's an absolute brilliant story, and it really delves into the 7th Doctor's manipulative, grand scheming type of side to his character that would become a heavy topic in the novels and the audios some years later. And Remembrance of the Daleks also does this to some degree, but I think because of just how fun of a story it is, and because I have more nostalgia for it than I do for Curse of Fenric, that's how it ended up at the best of the 7 stories on this list. That made sense. Number 8, now going to Big Finish for the 8th Doctor. There's some really good 8th Doctor Big Finish stories. Chimes of Midnight, Neverland, I even like Zagreus. I know the Divergent Universe arc is not looked upon too favourably, but Natural History of Fear is just phenomenal. Other Lives is really good as well. But I think for me, it's going to be the first of the Divergent Universe stories, which is Scherzo. I'm not too certain of this, but I honestly think Scherzo could be my favourite Doctor Who story of all time. Which is weird because it's just the Doctor and Charlie without the TARDIS, trapped in a white nothingness for 4 episodes, being tormented by this creature who is evolving and is made up of sound, which is pretty fucking abstract when you think about it. I still can't get over how abstract and like thought-provoking the concepts in this story are, for me personally at least. And I think that's one of the main reasons I love it. There's just something about Scherzo that's just so weird and out there that just really encompasses what the Divergent Universe arc should have been, but didn't end up being for the most part. It's got a very unique atmosphere, and there's really nothing in Doctor Who quite like Scherzo. Give it a listen. I'd highly recommend it. It really is its own thing. It's really unique. There's nothing else like it, and I'll leave it at that. Okay, the 9th Doctor. I like pretty much every episode in Series 1. I don't think there's a bad episode, but ultimately I went with Dalek. Yeah, like the Caves of Androzani, I don't think there's much that I can say about Dalek that's not been said before, so I probably won't go into depth on it. It's just a really fantastic story. Yeah, nothing really new to say about Dalek, it's just what it is, and that is absolutely amazing. Okay, for the 10th Doctor, I couldn't really pick a favourite to begin with. I had to think a lot about a lot of the episodes that I liked. There's a lot of episodes that I like from the 10th Doctor era, a fair few that I'm not too keen on, a couple that I really don't like at all. But then I sort of thought, which ones would I like place on a really high pedestal if I absolutely had to? And in the end it became a bit of a shootout between Midnight and Turn Left, but ultimately I went with Midnight. Brilliantly creepy, claustrophobic episode. Ever since the episode came out, all these years later, ever since 2008, I still can't stop thinking about the Midnight entity, trying to figure out what it was, you know, thinking about possibilities of what it could have been. And I don't think I'm ever going to stop thinking about that creature. And I also think it's a brilliant display of how bad the Doctor is at interacting with people when he doesn't have companions there to sort of help mediate interactions with other people. When the Doctor's on his own and he's dealing with a group of terrified people, because he's alien, he doesn't know how to interact with them like in the best way, and it does lead to him getting possessed by the alien and almost fucking murdered by the occupants of the bus, which I think is a brilliant direction to take an episode in, should we say. And yeah, there's plenty of things that I could say about Midnight, but really those deserve to be in their own video. So yeah, most of you have probably seen it, and I'm assuming most of you love it as much as I do. I hope you do. Midnight, you've seen it, then you probably know why I picked it. Okay, moving on to the 11th Doctor. This one I think was probably the hardest, because even though I grew up mainly with the 11th Doctor, I've not really properly gone back and watched a lot of his era in years. I think it's about time I did rectify that at some point. As soon as I get round to it, then I definitely will. But so picking out any like standout episodes for me was kind of difficult because I don't know, they're all really on the same level for me from what I remember. And yeah, I think I desperately need to do a rewatch of, I think both 10 and 11's era, to be honest. I need to do a big rewatch of, but 11 especially. But yeah, in the end, I ended up thinking about one episode which really stood out to me, and that's The Doctor's Wife. I think I've definitely grown to like this one a lot more over the years. I think if I was more familiar with 11's era currently, like if I actually went back and rewatched it all for like the first time in years, maybe I'd find stories that I like better than this one. But I think this is probably the one that I remember most fondly and remember the most about, personally. Series 6 overall is kind of a nostalgic thing for me. I have quite a soft spot for it, even if it's one of the worst series in New Who. And I think The Doctor's Wife is this brilliant little mix of slightly outlandish sci-fi ideas with the pocket universe and the sentient asteroid. It's got this brilliant creepy, slightly gothic sci-fi kind of vibe with the patchwork people and house and like the creepy stuff that happens in the TARDIS. And the setting of the asteroid is like really creepy as well. And it also mixes all this up with a brilliant little fun adventure and this like really unexpected emotional weight with the TARDIS becoming a living person for an episode. Given what the Doctor and the TARDIS have been through over like God knows how many centuries by the point that this episode takes place, it's really nice that they have an episode like this where the Doctor and the TARDIS finally get to like talk to each other properly, and they get to like discuss things, you know. I don't really think I can word this properly, but I hope you get what I mean. Okay, number 12. There was a few that I had in mind for the 12th Doctor. Listen and Flatline from Series 8. Extremis from Series 10 also crossed my mind quite a few times. But in the end I just had to go with Heaven Sent. I mean, brilliant direction, brilliant like emotional character piece. The whole thing is just a big metaphor for grief, especially with 12 after he just lost Clara in the previous episode. That's kind of the whole point of the episode, so they did a brilliant job with that. Slightly existential, crisis-inducing at times, if I'm being completely honest, when you stop to think about what the episode is about and what it's trying to convey. It's a little bit like Doctor Who's version of the Torchwood episode A Day in the Death, which also might be my favourite Torchwood episode. I gotta talk about Torchwood more on this channel. There's not much more that I can say about it that hasn't been said already. It's a brilliant story, and yeah, I think in the end I always knew that it was going to be my favourite 12th Doctor episode. And lastly, 13th Doctor. There's a lot of episodes that I quite like. Rosa, It Takes You Away from Series 11, plus Resolution. Yeah, Resolution, fuck. And then, obviously, some of the standard episodes in Series 12 as well, like Fugitive of the Jadoon and Ascension of the Cybermen. Well, the whole three-part, I guess three-part finale to Series 12 I think is brilliant, as well as Revolution of the Daleks. But overall, I think Spyfall is probably my favourite of the Whittaker era so far. While I did enjoy Series 11, it was quite a departure from what we've been used to in Doctor Who the last decade or so, especially. But with Spyfall, it was it just felt like a real return to form. This is proper Doctor Who. For me, Spyfall is it's proper New Who content. It's Series 4 level of Doctor Who. Most people probably won't agree with me on that, but Spyfall is honestly would rank it up amongst some of the best RTD episodes. I think it's that good. I don't know why, but it just feels so much like a Doctor Who story. And with that, I'm going to sign off on this video. So yeah, that was the best episode, in my opinion, for each Doctor. Now, knowing humans, I'm sure there's some controversial opinions on this list that people will not agree with. Therefore, leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't already, and most important, comment below what your opinions are on this. Comment any of your agreeing/disagreeing thoughts on my thoughts. Yeah, do that. Leave your own little list, perhaps, if you like to, or any variations thereof, and I'll see you in the next video. I'm planning to do a worst episode of each Doctor's list as well soon after this one, so look forward to that. In the meantime, bye!